All right.
All right. All you, Michelle.
Excellent. All right. Well, welcome everybody as you are signing in. We're doing this kind of last minute juggle here as we get started. Welcome, welcome. My name is Michelle Houghton, and we are going to be doing some Copic coloring today. Yay. I have been teaching, I've been teaching Copic for, gosh, I think 15, 16 years now, both online and in person all over the country and in through Canada. I'm now doing that for myself. I teach what are called Copic College weekends all over the US, and I'm also still teaching online. And in fact, starting in November, late November, I am opening up Copic College online as well. So if you're not familiar with my website, you can check in there and get all the news there about my teaching specifically. But I am here today with Two Corporation, which is the Copic distributor and manufacturer, and Michael's that is hosting these really fun online live classes. So I was asked to come and do a little Copic coloring, and that is what we are here to do today. I can't necessarily keep up with comments in the comment section, but my man Nate is here. He is over in the comment section, ready and waiting for questions from you. And as those come through, if there's ones that he feels like he needs to field with me, he will interrupt and get those over to me. But if you have any questions, comments, concerns, shoot those over there into that comment section on the side, and he's going to answer those for you and keep us rolling. This is being recorded right from the get-go. We hit the record button, and so you can come back later and see all my guffaws and mistakes again if you'd like. But also those that enter partway through can go back and see the recording. People who were unable to make it during this time slot, that will be over at Michael's, and you can get the full thing. So a little bit of information about Copic markers, because I know we're going to have a huge range of people. I actually see a couple familiar faces out there, which is awesome. That's awesome to see people that I've met before. But a little bit tiny intro to Copic markers. If you're brand new to Copic and don't know what they're all about, Copic markers are an alcohol-based marker instead of water-based, which is a lot of us, that's what we used as kids, was Crayola markers, the Mr. markers that had that smell to them. Those are all water-based. The difference with alcohol-based is that they blend kind of like paint. You can layer them and blend them together. So that's the beauty and the magic of them. Some of the features that Copic has is that their markers have two ends. Both the Ciao and the Sketch that Michael's carry have two ends. They are refillable and the nibs are replaceable. The Sketch markers are these guys that look like this. They're kind of an oval shape. These guys come in 358 colors. So lots of those. The same inks are in what are called the Ciaos, these little round guys. And these guys have the exact same inks. There's 180 of these, but when you have a marker that's marked with an E15 in a Ciao, it's exactly the same as the Sketch that's E15. So it's completely interchangeable. So you can have a collection of both and they work perfectly well together. The benefits of the Ciao is they are less expensive. So especially if you're new to Copic markers and just trying things out, it's a great way to experiment and get started at a little bit lesser price point. I think that's the basic stuff. If you've got questions along the way as we start coloring, go ahead and add those in the comment section, but we'll get switched on to my desktop so you guys can see what my hands are doing, and we're going to start some coloring. Thank you so much. All right, so we are coloring up. I am going to be coloring up this specific stamp. This is by Stampendous. It is carried at Michael's. If you do not have this specific stamp with you today, hopefully you found a snowman or a fox or a combination thereof. Any of those are going to work, but this is a fairly large wood stamp, wood and rubber, and I have stamped that on my white, just smooth cardstock with Memento Tuxedo black ink. Also can find that at Michael's. I didn't do the stamping here because I'm not a spectacular stamper, and I didn't want you guys to see me dropping my stamp and making big messes. So I went ahead and stamped these ahead of time, and I've already trimmed my paper down to a smaller piece. And I think we have all of these sizes included kind of where you signed up, but this particular piece of paper is 3 3/4 inches by 3 1/4 inches. So I really truly just trimmed it right down to the image itself if you happen to end up with this particular snowman. All right, we are going to use a group of 7 Copic markers. We have 2 earth tones, 2 greens, 2 blue violets, BVs, and the Colorless Blender, this guy that's marked with a 0. And I'm going to keep that handy because I'm going to use it in several different situations. So hopefully you have a combination that's going to work for you. If you don't have the exact colors that I'm using, that is perfectly fine. This is more about experimenting and having a good time coloring. So I'm going to start with my earth tones. And I'll show you real quick what we're aiming for. This is where we're headed. So I've got a few sections. I've got my fox. Sorry about that, everybody. And now I'm flipped. I turned it on silence, but the person who called comes through. Sorry about that. I think we got it switched. Yep. So we've got a few sections that are with that earth tone. We've got the fox. I went ahead and did the carrot. Since I've got that limited number of colors, this is going to work really well for that orange carrot nose. I've got a hat band on the snowman and the stocking. And some of that is creating kind of that balanced image with those limited colors. So let's start with those. And I'm going to start right away with the fox. And I'm going to start with my lighter earth tone, which is the E15. And I'm going to open my brush nib on either your Ciao or your sketch. There's a gray band on the end of the marker that has your brush nib. So I'm going to start with that. And I'm actually going to color in all the fur on the fox that I think is going to be that kind of rusty brown color. Out on his tail. And I slow down a little bit as I get into some of those details. I tend to do that base coat in small circles or go back and forth a few times so that I get a nice even coverage. If I only do a single pass, you can sometimes still see just a gentle, like you can see the lines where you've colored. So if I go over sections 2 or 3 times, I'm going to get that nice smooth color. Now I could stop here and leave it. It's a beautiful, intense, bright color. But what we like about Copics is this ability to make things look 3-dimensional. So I'm going to switch over. This is now my E18. And I'm going to switch over and I'm going to look for the areas that I think are going to be darker on the fox. So I'm going to go to the bottom section of his tail. And I'm going to put some of this E18 along the bottom half, bottom edge of his paw, and up his backside a little bit. Maybe not all the way to the top. I want to round that leg a little bit. And I'm going to come in right above where that back leg curves in. And again, trying to create a little bit of curve here, and it tucks in. So I know it's going to get darker. I'm going to come down the front edge of that front leg. Another section I know is going to get really dark is he's got this little tiny piece that we can see of his kind of underbelly. So I'm going to get that darker. And then we've got his head. So I'm going to come in from the bottom edge right above the scarf. And then right along his white fur. And again, I'm trying to make his head look round. So I'm going to curve it around a little bit. Tiny bit. So just part way up from the base of the ear, but not all the way up. I'll get you guys a little closer. That's where I have put my darker color. Now, again, I could leave it like this, but what I'm aiming for is that smooth blend, and that's where those alcohol markers come into play. I'm going to come back to my E15, and I'm going to work right along the edge of the darker marker, the E18. I'm going to circle a little bit, and then I'm going to kind of pull that color into the lighter area. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to do the same thing down the front leg. And I'm going to also do the same thing. So I'm circling kind of on the edge of that darker color and pulling that in to the lighter area. Now you're going to notice I actually work my way all the way across that lighter area. A couple reasons for that. First of all, if I don't, as I go over it one more time with this light color, that area gets darker. And so you'd have that real distinct kind of a third color. But the other reason is if I stop, it creates almost a watermark where the wet is hitting the dry. So, but I want to show you, this is the difference. So I've blended the tail and his head and his arm or front leg, sorry. And you can see still the light to dark, but you don't have that distinct line between the two colors. So I'm going to do the same thing. So I'd like to smooth that out on his body and his back as well. So again, I'm going to circle and pull that into that lighter area. And now he's fairly smooth. So I've got 3 other spots, and each of them are fairly small. The fox had a little more detail. So I'm going to go ahead and work on the carrot, the hat band, and the sock. The carrot, I'm still EU15 if anybody was curious. I'm going to fill in the carrot nose. Then on the sock, I'm going to fill in the main body of the sock. I'm going to leave the toe and the heel white. And I'm going to leave the fur white. Now, if you are at home coloring this, remember you can turn this guy upside down and every which way. I'm trying to keep it upright, but
Hey, Michelle.
yeah.
Real quick, we got Tova Faust wants to know what kind of paper is this?
So this is just truly like a copy grade white cardstock. I found one that worked really well. It's called a hammer mill, or called hammer mill. But what you're looking for, what I use, is smooth white cardstock. And I tend to use about 3 different kinds. There's also marker papers out there. So I would encourage people to experiment a little bit and find something that really works well for them. Each of us, because we color differently, something's going to work better for you than it works for someone else. So experimenting a little bit, getting small groups of paper if you can to start is going to work really well.
All right, thanks, Michelle. Actually, can you flip that over real quick so we can see what
Yeah.
the through looks like? That's really good.
Yep. So you can see like where I've got the 2 and 3 layers of ink, like right where his head is, or where I did the blending on his body and on his tail. Just more ink, and that shows through a little bit. You're really going to get some bleed through on most papers.
All right,
Alrighty?
good to go. Thank you, Michelle.
Absolutely. The last piece that we're hitting is that hat band. Now on this one, I'm going to leave a small section of white. So I'm going to work from the left, and I'm going to come up about 2/3 the way. And then from the right, I'm going to come back in this little tiny bit, about 1/8 of an inch, but I've left this little tiny band of white. My goal here is to try to make that band look like it's shiny, more like a satin fabric. So it's going to have that bright white highlight. Okay, cap on the E15, grabbing E18. The carrot is easy. We're going to go right along that bottom edge. Sock is pretty easy too. We're going to go along the bottom edge. And then usually you're going to pick a side because this is a nice long cylinder. Because of where I put the shading on the fox, I'm going to put this along the front edge of the stocking as well. I'm not super concerned like light source and trying to figure that out. What I'm worried about is consistency. So I'm going to just make sure I get that darker part over on the same side on all the pieces. On the hat, I'm going to come in from the left, and it comes about halfway across that E15. I come in from the right, a little teeny tiny bit right along the edge. And those are my spots with my E18 on the carrot, hat band, and sock. And our next step is to go back to E15 and blend those together. So we'll start with the easy first. E15 on the nose, right along the edge to re-liquefy that, get that wet again. On the stocking, right along that darker edge into that lighter area, darker edge into the lighter. Same on the hat, and I want to try to keep it out of that white as best I can. If it comes a little further, that's okay. So I've got one more step on that hat. So I've blended those together. This is where I'm going to grab that Colorless Blender, and I'm going to go right into that white area. The Colorless Blender is just the alcohol solution that's in every Copic marker. It's what suspends the ink. So I'm going to come into this white area, and I'm going to push right along that edge of the E15, and I'm going to do it in both directions. And what happens, get you close, is it's going to hit that edge with that alcohol again, and it's going to fade it. So now I've got E18 out here, blends into E15, and then softens right into that white. I'm going to do that same little trick on the fox's ears, and then we'll move on to another color. So setting aside my blender, but keeping it close, I'm going to grab my E15 again, and I'm going to do 1 or 2 tiny flicks right into the center of the whites of the fox's ears. And immediately grab my Colorless Blender, starting in the white and pushing into that light brown. And it gives us that kind of almost peachy, soft color on the inner ear. All right. Color combo number 2. We're done for earth tones. With the earth tones, we are going to grab 2 greens. The particular greens that I have and I'm working with today are a G8-2. That's my lighter green. And I have a G29, my darker green. And you can tell that from the lids. You can also tell that from the last number on the marker. So I've got one that ends in a 2 and one that ends in a 9. The 2 is the lighter, the 9 is the darker, because that number tells us the value of the marker, of the ink inside. All right, light green is starting first, and I am going to do 3 areas again. I'm going to do the scarf on the fox. I'm going to do some of the scarf on the snowman, and then I'm going to add a little bit of green onto those patches on his hat. So I'm going to start with my light green on the fox's scarf. And to the best of my ability, I am going to try to stay out of the polka dots. Not always easy. So I'm going to just use that little tiny tip of the Copic brush nib and work my way around. Work all the way around the back of the neck. So I've got it all colored in. And I'm just going to do each section this time. I'm going to switch to my G29. Now, if this is the color you're working with, just so you know, this guy's got a lot of punch. This is a really dark, strong color. So we're going to use it in very tiny amounts. We're aiming for the bottom edge of the horizontal piece of scarf that wraps around the scarf, the fox. Sorry. I also figure that's a little bit darker where it comes out from under the piece that's folding over and falling vertically down. Then I'm going to come along that left-hand edge, just like we did on the sock and just like we did on the fox, and the bottom edge. So again, our goal is to create a little shape. So left edge along the bottom, all the way along the bottom of the horizontal piece, and right into those little corners where the horizontal part is coming out from under the vertical. Add just a little bit there. Yep. Cap on that because I don't want that rolling around uncapped. Grab my G8-2. Same thing. Wet that edge and pull it out into the lighter area. I hope a few of you out there are coloring, even if this is not what you're coloring, that you're getting creative today and taking some time to give your mind some rest and let your hands be creative. Now come over to the other side. And I just work my way across an image. There we go. So we've got the greens on his scarf blended together. The next part we're going to look at is this long plaid scarf on the snowman. And if you remember from the start, what I am going to aim for is kind of that plaid look. And I'm going to leave it white with the green. So I'm going to color every other stripe. It doesn't matter which one you start with. If you are working on the same image, light green, G82, I'm going to start on the vertical portion and I'm going to go to the far left side. And I'm going to fill in all the way down the length of the scarf. Then I'm going to skip a row and I'm going to hit the second row. And then I'll leave that last row open. And then I'm going to do the same thing working in the opposite direction going down the length. So I'm going to pick which one to start with. And I'm going to leave this one by a space white and hit the next one. White, green, white. The thick one goes green, white, green, white, green, white. I think you guys get the idea. White, green. And I go all the way down into the portion of the scarf that's even pooled on the ground. It's like one more section. What you might notice is a couple places where you did a horizontal stripe that went over the vertical stripe. Some of those squares are now looking a little bit darker. And again, it's because you've hit it multiple times with the marker. Same deal for the portion of the scarf going around his neck. There's not a right or wrong place to start. I'm going to start against his body at the bottom and fill that bottom stripe in, avoiding the fox's nose. Skip. And one more green stripe going horizontal. Then we've got the up and down, the vertical. Skip, green, skip, green. Let's see. I'm trying to do this at least similar to what I've done in the sample so you guys have good images to refer back to. All right. So we have a plaid scarf, but because we're working with Copic, we can add a little bit of shape in there, even with the plaid. So I'm going to use my G29 very cautiously again. And I'm going to come along the bottom edge. And right above the snowman's body. And then I'm going to come along this left, because that section is green. So I can come all the way where it's popping out from under that vertical section again. And then remember, everything we've been shading has been along the left side. So we're going to run that darker green down the length of the scarf, and it's going to stop when it turns and goes out horizontal. And then I'm going to come part way out along, even if you don't do every single one, I'm going to come part way along some of these stripes. And I'm going to hit 2 or 3 little spots on the scarf portion that comes out along the snow, because I want to show that it's kind of bumping up and down. So I'll show you here in just a second, because I think this will be a good one to see a little closer. So I haven't run my marker all the way along the edge. Every time the scarf kind of dips downward, I add a little bit of that darker green, a little bit of darker green, a little bit of darker green. And that's going to help the viewer see that movement. Back to our light green, and we want to soften those areas. Now this time, I'm trying to stay within the stripes. So I'm not going to get to go very far. As much as anything, I'm coloring right on top of that G29 because most of these are fairly narrow. All right, working my way down, coming into a couple of those broader stripes.
Michelle, once you get to the bottom of the scarf, Wendy
Yeah.
wants to know, when you get to the tassels, can you give us advice on how to color those?
Okay. All right, looks like we're just about there. So the tassels are a little bit of a challenge because if you think about how the tassels on a scarf work, they truly are just threads. There's no thickness to them. So a couple options. You can actually leave them just as they are. You can leave them just with that black, or if you've got fairly good um, hand control, you could go in and run your marker over that black line and add a hint of green to it. The issue is you're not going to see it a whole lot. Um, you could even do, when you're done, if you had a smaller black sketch pen, you could go over the or green, sorry, green sketch pen, you could go over those lines to add that touch of green. But because there's no thickness there, I usually won't fill in that whole section because it's truly just the threads. Is that fair?
Think so.
Okay. If there was another specific question and she asks again, just let me know.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So that actually, oh, hat. Don't forget the hat. So I wanted to add one more little piece of green, and I felt like these little patches on the hat were a great place to do that, but I want to keep it really, really simple. So I'm going to grab that G82, my lighter green, and I'm just going to do that plaid again where I'm doing every other. So skip, hit, and then the same with the opposite direction. And on the hat, I am not going to go in and try to add shading. I just wanted to have that touch of green, and because it's so small, that's an area I usually am going to leave alone. Now, if I was doing this for a fancy publication or some competition, I might go in and try to add some small amounts of the darker, but for a card, especially for a friend, this is exactly how that green on the hat would look. The last color combination we've got is our blue violets. And again, I've got a light and a dark. My light one is BV000. And then my dark one is a BV25. Those are the two that I'm going to be working with today. The other marker I will be using with my blue violets is that Colorless Blender. So keep that guy right next to you because we're going to be using that quite a bit with the blue violets. All right, starting with the lighter again. And what we're doing with the blue violets is we're hitting spaces that are going to be white and spaces that actually are going to, we want to make look almost black. So two extremes. We're going to start with the white areas. BV000, and I'm going to start with the big body and head of the snowman. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to do what's called a flick. If you don't know what that is, I'll show you here in just a second. But I'm using the kind of the side of that brush nib, and I'm going from the edge of the snowman in toward the center. And I'm going to keep mine along the left and bottom edge. So it's going to create kind of a C curve or crescent shape around the edge of the snowman. My goal is to make him look round. Okay. So we've got this nice curve coming in and around. And I usually do this in small sections. I'm going to come right back with my colorless blender, not paying attention. And I'm going to start in the white, and I'm going to push back at that blue violet. And just like what happened in the ears and on the hat brim, this is going to fade that into white. So we've got this nice transition of the blue violet into white. That is what that looks like. Now, I can actually see this. I'm not sure if you will be able to, but I can actually see that wet area where I put the colorless blender. That is going to dry fairly quickly, and I won't see that as soon as it dries, but it takes a few seconds, and sometimes you end up with a little wet mark, and it truly is where the paper just still has that moisture. I'm going to do one more thing here on the bottom edge of the snowman. Even though he's white, I still want him to look curved. So I'm going to grab my BV25, very small amounts. I'm going to do some small dots just down in this very bottom corner. Now I'm not going to go as far as I did with the BV000. This is down in this very left bottom corner. And then I'm going to grab the BV000, really light coating right over the top of that. Darker blue violet. It's going to soften those little dots, so it's kind of smushing them together. If I need to, I could even grab the colorless blender again and push on that. So I'm going to pull that up close to you guys. So what's happening with the colorless blender, I think I just saw this question whip by the screen, is that the colorless blender is actually pushing the ink. Think of it more like a broom. It's not an eraser. It's not making it go away. It's moving it. So as I start on the white and brush back toward the blue violet, it's pushing small amounts of that ink back toward the base of the snowman and softening that effect. And so I get this nice gradation from the blue violet into the white.
So Michelle, Lauren's actually got a question about the colorless blender technique. They want to know, would pushing up on the color be wrong? Does the direction that you push with the colorless blender matter? Or in this case, because your shading and gradation are lower, you're pushing down?
I think, so she's asking about starting like in the blue violet and pulling up.
Pulling up, yes.
Okay.
I believe so.
So here's the issue. If I started out in the blue violet, if I start out in the blue violet and pull up, I'm actually going to create like a blank spot. It's going to push the ink away from that starting spot. By pushing from the white into the blue violet, it softens the edge. And if I go into, so I'm going to scoop my paper, everybody. If we say, this is the edge of our snowman, quick snowman, and here's the blue violet. It's not going to be exactly the same, but you guys will get the idea here. So if I start out here and pull it out, it literally is creating this line right where my marker starts, because I can literally come in and create dots or stripes in the center of that color. So when I'm trying to do a gradation, I start out on this white area because what I'm aiming for is softening just the edge. And if I'm pushing it back in, that darkens up back at the edge and lightens up out toward the white. That help everybody?
I think so.
Okay. So we've got some other areas. We're going to do the head almost identical to what we just did on the body, but I'm going to keep it a little lighter. I'm not going to add that darker blue violet. So BV 000, same left and bottom edge, a little bit up under the hat. And then I'm going to immediately come back, Colorless Blender, from the white into the blue violet. And when that's all you're doing, it's that fast. All right, 2 more kind of areas that I want to make look white that we are going to add some color to. The sock, I'm going to add a little bit of this blue violet to kind of give that shape. I'm going to come in from the bottom edge of the toe and the heel. And then on the fur, I'm going to add some little dots along the bottom edge. And then on the interior, I'm going to fill that in a little bit. Now this is one place, even though it's white, I am going to put one little piece of my BV25, and it's right along the edge of that fur trim. It's right above that line. I'll get you guys close so you can see it. And that's going to help us see down into that stocking, that it's a hollow shape. All right, grab my Colorless Blender, soften the toe, soften the heel, and I am going to kind of dot right over that fur. It's pretty light, but just to soften that effect as well. The last thing I'm going to do with white areas is I'm going to give them a little bit of a background. I'm going to create kind of a snowy hill that he is sitting on. So we have this stuff down here, but I want to give him a little bit more of a background. So I'm going to come in, brush nib, and I'm going to dot in a hilly background. The fun part about doing this in dots is you can't really go wrong. If it goes up a little too high, if it goes down a little bit, that's okay. That's what you meant to do. And then I'm going to add a few little bumps and hills. And these are all dots. There's not a wrong or right place to put these. I'm just trying to create kind of an uneven background, so it looks more like a little bit of a scene. As I get closer down here, we'll put a few more dots right behind the hill that the snowman is sitting on. And then we're going to do a few right against the snowman near his base. Part of this is even on snow, we usually see that glistening texture. And so I feel like that gives us a little bit of that. This is one little tiny place I'm going to add a little bit of that BV25 again, and it's right near the base of the snowman where we've got these kind of transitions in between these little bumps of snow. I'm going to add just a few of the BV 2.5, kind of underneath the scarf where it bumps up, and a couple of these little spots. Again, the beauty of this, there's not really a right or wrong on this. So if yours doesn't look exactly like mine, guess what? Mine doesn't look exactly like mine either. They're going to be really close, but they will not be exact. So, Colorless Blender, I am literally going to go through and I'm going to circle real lightly once across all of these little snow dots. And the whole reason of that is I don't want it to look like there's freckles all over the place. I want it to look more like just a gentle texture. So that's going to make all of those dots kind of go and spread out. Sorry, I'm kind of a sound effect person. And it's going to soften the effect so it doesn't look so much like polka dots. So I'm just lightly passing over all of those dots. And what I usually do is I'll do one pass and then I'll stop and I'll hold my art at about arm's length, kind of scoop back, take a look. I'll say, did that do enough? Or am I still seeing freckles instead of snow and gentle texture? If I need to do it again, I can come back with my Colorless Blender and soften them again. But I'm pretty happy with where it's at right now. We've got a couple areas that I actually want to make look almost black. So I'm going to actually use the 2 blue violets to achieve that again, but I've got a couple areas that are just going dark. So BV 2.5, the coal on his little face for his smile, I'm assuming that's black. So I'm hitting those. Then the one other spot, and this one's a little tighter, but I am going to fill in the twig, his arm, with a BV 2.5 as well, very lightly with that brush nib. I will tell you, if you have a little bit of a pressure control issue, like you're pushing too hard and it gets too fat, try opening up the chisel nib or the medium broad nib. And if you work on one tiny little corner, you can get nice fine lines. And because this side, this nib is stiffer, you might be able to get thinner lines if you have an issue with that. Hat, last thing. Remember that white we left on the hat band? We're going to continue that white stripe up the hat. So lighter blue violet, BV 000, coming in right up to that white stripe. Both sides. And then I'm going to come down into the center because it looks like the hat dips in. I'm going to leave that top back edge white as well. BV 2.5, coming in from the left, part way, not all the way to the white. In from the right, and right down into the dip of that hat. I'm going to blend those 2 blue violets together. So starting on the edge of the darker, I'm going to bring that white in a little tighter. Realizing as I'm blending this that I did not do the brim of the hat. We will do that in a second. Colorless Blender softens the edge of my BV 000. All right, top of the hat. So my goal is that it looks like a cylinder. So we've got that highlight running the length of the cylinder. Brim of the hat, and this will be quick. The lighter blue violet is going to come all the way across and leave a touch of white right at the top where it bends over. And you can fill in the underside. We're going to get that quite a bit darker, but you can go ahead and start with the lighter blue violet if you like. BV25, coming from that back edge, almost all the way up, but stopping short. So we still have that lighter blue violet. And then the underside of the brim gets colored in. So we can really see that it's the underside. It pushes that back visually. BV000, soften that edge. Colorless Blender, fade it to white. All right, we've got a fox and a snowman. And all we used was 6 colors and the Colorless Blender. So really limited color range. And so I would really encourage you, if you're thinking about getting into Copic, you can start with very small collections and do some amazing things. So what I put together for you guys on the site was this card like this. So if you wanted to put it all together, we listed the pieces that I used. We have a really standard card base, 8.5 by 5.5, and then folded in half. In fact, I'm going to do this so you guys can see this better. There we go. And I'm just going to say this really quickly. I know we are like right at 3 minutes to 4. If you're taking off, thank you very, very much for coming. All I'm doing is attaching things, so you're not missing anything. But just for those who like to see how we finish this up, I've got this already trimmed. I have a dark green cardstock that I've trimmed to look just barely beyond my image size. So I'm going to attach that with a little double-sided adhesive. I have a monster tape runner. And I am not a person who gets out a ruler or straight edge. I just stick things down and eyeball it to the best of my ability. But if you are a straight edge person, please be my guest. I have a Kraft colored cardstock, and I found this one at Michael's. I love it. It actually has like a wood, I don't know if you can hear that. It's got like a wood grain embossed on it. It is so cool. I'm a Kraft color cardstock person anyway, and this one just fascinates me. So again, double-sided adhesive, and this one's going on the card base. This is always a little harder for me. This is where I probably should use a ruler. So that guy goes down. Then I have 2 of these kind of burgundy, and this one has a little shimmer to it. I had fun shopping at Michael's, can you tell? So this guy, I'm going to do 3/4 of an inch, 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch from the bottom. Okay. I have twine, and this, I've got 3 pieces. I've got 2 that are about 18 inches long. This first one is literally going to go right on top of that burgundy. And then I'm literally going to run tape. Sorry about the tape gun in the way. I'm going to stick this down on the interior, and that is why I have a second strip. For those who like a neat and tidy inside to your card, this is what's going to cover those tails. Now, if you were a pre-planner, you could wrap that under that strip and have it all on the front of the card. And that would actually be very easy. I, however, am not a pre-planner. I literally do my cards on the fly. So I end up having to use a few tricks here and there. Second piece of twine that's about 18 inches, 3 fingers, wraps around. Oops. That little piece untucked. And then I've got one little short piece. It's going to tie. This is where you need a third hand. And a lot of times, depending on your twine, a single knot will hold it. But this is going to give me a fun little bow. Trim those off. I'm going to use some foam dots. Just so everybody knows, if you haven't bought any of these things that I'm playing with, anything that I've used today, you can find at Michael's. Yeah. So I'm going to put a few. If you've got foam tape, that works. I like foam. I like it, adds a little bit of dimension. Nate, as I put these last pieces on, were there any last questions that people had?
Let's find out. Everybody in the audience, if you have any questions, please let us know or show us what you're working on. Do you want to take a look and see what you guys have?
If you guys have been coloring. So I usually attach the image and then come back and attach the bow. And that way I know where to stick it. So he's not, I could even turn it vertical so he's not right on top, but I usually like to have a little overlap on there. But there you go.
Looking great. Actually, Heather does have a question. What do you attach the bow with?
So 2 options, Heather. You could use a small piece of foam tape. So like on mine, because I have the dots or the little circles, I would actually cut this in half. If I use this, just so it doesn't, it's not quite as bulky. The 2 things that I would actually lean more toward grabbing are what are called glue dots, which is kind of a clear glue dot, little circle. And I would tuck that. And again, I would tuck it right underneath the knot of the bow. If you have a little more patience, you could use a wet adhesive. So like a glue. So put a little bit again on the back of the knot, but then you have to kind of hold for a few seconds and patiently let it sit. So that one's going to depend on patience. For this one, I kind of like the foam dot because it got it up right next to or on top of that little snowman image.
All right.
Well, if people are taking off, if you want to show off your stuff, I'll sit for a few seconds, but I just want to thank you so much for coming. I really enjoy teaching. I hope I will get to see some of you at my website. Let me grab real quickly. We printed these out for you guys. This is a whole slew of social media. This is all of Copic, where you can find all of their websites and follow their stuff. And then this is me.
Everybody
All of the
screenshot
same
this.
stuff. Yeah, I screenshot it. For me, if you go to my blog, this back very bottom one, you can find all of this. So even if you got one, that would be it. And Copic have theirs all lined up, that they're pretty easy to locate. But thank you so much, everybody, for stopping in. Again, if you only got part of this, this will be up on the recorded version, and so you can see the whole thing through, especially if you decide to go get that stamp and some of these supplies at Michael's. It'll be there waiting for you when you're ready.
A real quick answer to Lauren wants to know if there's a starter marker set that's any good. My vote is any 6-piece Ciao set, preferably like brights or pastels. Michelle, what's your favorite marker starter set?
A starter set. I actually go a little bit bigger, Nate, because I want to have at least a couple pairs. So I tend to work with one that's got at least a couple pairs, like that have 2 greens or 2 earth tones, because I want to use that blending combination. So a lot of times, especially for a starter set, I mean, they have some, if you can do it, those 36-piece Ciao sets are really nice, have some really good beginner sets. And
to answer Lisa's question about refills, please check with michaels.com. Our Copic ink is very, very popular, and in some places they might not be available just yet, but keep checking, and they should be available for you either now or soon.
Yep.
And yes, Michaels will be hosting more Copic sessions. Please check michaels.com/classes, and you will see a full schedule of all classes available with us. Just look for Copic with us, and those are our classes. Otherwise, please also check any one of our Copic social pages, and we will have announcements there for you.
Absolutely.
All right, everybody have a happy Monday.
Have a great one, everybody.